Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Magic Hour podcast. I'm your host, Shireen Campbell, and I'm the founder of My Little Magic Shop. One day, I lit a candle and asked for clarity in my professional and life path. Soon after, I was gifted with the message, and I'm here to help others go through exactly what I was going through then. And just like that, My Little Magic Shop and the Magic Hour podcast was born. Welcome, Sheetal. I'm so excited to have you as a guest.
Thank you so much. It's fantastic to be on this platform, and I'm just so happy to connect with you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm like really like geeking out right now because I feel like sacred geometry is, something that I know a little tiny bit about, but definitely not like that much. And it's something I've been really wanting to, learn. I feel like the little that I do know has to do with like any sort of crystal work. So I'm like really excited to soak up your knowledge.
Thank you.
But the thing is, I always love to start from the beginning. So can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing before all of your sacred geometry and magical work started? I'd really love to hear like a little bit about where you're from and a little background on your childhood.
Absolutely. So 500 million years ago,
Love it.
my name is Sheetal Rajan, therefore I am Indian. I come from the south part of India, Kerala. But interestingly enough, my parents moved to the Middle East and I was actually born here. After that, from the age of 3 to 13, about 10 years, I was in India. And that's where I really, those are the formative years. And then I came back to the Middle East, and I've been here for about close to 25 years. But when someone asks me where do I base myself, I say I base myself on planet Earth because I have been traveling all over. It really came down to my most favorite thing to do in the world is to travel, and so wherever I travel, I'm able to take this work and bring it to seekers and go meet my larger soul family. So yeah, that's me generally as to where I come from.
Yeah.
The journey in itself has been quite an interesting journey. Having been born here, but then my parents were in the Middle East, and then I was dropped off to my family in Kerala, and I had a fairly dramatic childhood. There's a lot of sort of sexual abuse that went in there, and there was a lot of growing up in a very conservative environment and having and always knowing when you're young there's something more to the world, but you have no access to it. So I grew up in that sort of a construct which which eventually brought me back to Dubai, and then everything started changing. Then that's where I am generally from.
I love that. I mean, it's definitely so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. I find that often people tend to be called to healing a lot of times because of their own healing based off of, traumatic or difficult childhood experiences. And so you also mentioned that, your background was very conservative. Like, did you grow up in like a really strong or spiritual or religious background?
It was essentially religious. We were all Hindus. However, my mother was a Christian, so there was sort of my dad's side of the family who I lived with was very Indian. We were super Hindu, and we went visit the temple every morning. Every weekend we would go to the bigger temples, and there were pujas and rituals constantly at home, reading of mantras, going for satsangs. All of these were what the modern spiritual world considers the current normal, which is doing a little bit of yoga, doing a little bit of meditation. It was pretty much normal every day. I mean, we prayed every day and all of these things. But then I always knew my mom was Christian, and then there was that sort of pull towards, oh, what's that? What's that side of things? But it eventually did come to a point where, and then I moved to the Middle East. What do you know? So there's the Hinduism, the Christianity, and then suddenly I'm in an Islamic country, and it's amazing how all of those kind of have contributed towards how I started shaping my beliefs as a person. So yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Just because I'm really curious, like you have like this, Christian and Hindu background, and now all of a sudden you're being introduced into Islam, and it's like these are like, major religions that, have
Major religions, absolutely.
lots of similarities, but I'm sure definitely some differences, like cultural differences. So like what was that like trying to kind of balance?
I think more than anything else, growing up in the kind of conditions that I grew up in helped me have enough information from each of those constructs that then led to the adult me going, what do I want to learn from that first set? What do I want to learn from the second set? Because you can imagine after seeing all of these harsh religious sort of dogmas that I grew up with, and then coming into a space where I had to decide what I wanted to do, I obviously started moving towards atheism. And then, from there, starting to talk about one world and, starting to talk about one brotherhood or sisterhood, all of these things. And then my experience as such with where I am today starts really when I was younger. So in the moments of what we now call trauma, but which I'm hoping by this end of the conversation the word trauma will be translated to something else, hopefully. Yeah. So having gone through that really intense experience when I was really young, when I was about I think from the age of 3 till I was, I think I could mark it to up to 5 or 6. I used to see Goddess Kali in front of me all the time. And that's not one of the goddesses that our family prayed to. But I used to see like this crazy woman with big hair, red tongue. That's the Goddess Kali, the goddess of destruction and, ego destruction and transformation. And I used to just, I put that off as, oh, there's that lady again. Because I was a kid. I was not scared of her. She was never scary. She always turned up in the most sort of cathartic moments as in my childhood. And then so that goes off for a bit, and then I moved to the Middle East, and I grew up here somewhere around, and I think I always had that within me to protect people. I had that thing to give clarity to people. Especially, I used to always look at them and go, "Hey, why are you confused about this? This is this, this is this, this is this." And I was more of a logical person than anything else. I got into advertising, worked in advertising for 15 years. It is you are paid to not have a discipline as a creative person. You know, that's what you're paid for. So it was fantastic to be able to sort of expand my knowledge base into kind of new ideas that we would do for different campaigns. Somewhere in 2010, as a sort of hobby, or not really a hobby, how you suddenly sit down with your girlfriends and you go, hey, let's go for that salsa class, let's go join a salsa class for a month or two. It was like that. And suddenly I realized I signed up for Reiki healing, and this was in 2000. I want to say 2008 or 2009. But I signed up for it and I went for it. And suddenly from there, it was like this sort of cascading of events that happened, where in 2013, I suddenly realized there is more to the world than the 3D construct that I know about. In 2013, I was somewhere in Nepal, and gorgeous place, Nepal. And I was out in a valley walking around, and suddenly I just sat down and my eyes started blinking for about 2 hours. And I downloaded all the information there is to know about sacred geometry, but never in any language or never in any visuals. It was pure knowing. So it was not really being downloaded, as I did not see an angel descending, or I did not see any figures, or there was no voice in my head. That would have really scared me. But that would have been like, nope. I would have noped my way out of there. But it was this sudden deep knowing, and everything there is to know about energy and sacred design, and all of this sort of started downloading into me. I could see the auras of my friends standing at a distance. I could see the energy fields of trees. And of course, the logical mind at that time was thinking, I'm going crazy, must commit myself to an asylum. But what was happening on the other side was, today I can tell you, is I aligned with an ancient remembering within myself. And so this, and I'm still a very logical person who came out of that and said, great, so looks like I've lost my mind. But now to find out what it is that I saw. So I started doing a little bit of research before I would speak to anybody. And I I did not know the words sacred geometry, because all of this just came to me in this kind of knowing.
I feel like this is so beautiful. We have to talk about this story a little bit more though. You're just like, you're on the top of this mountain in Nepal, and you're just like, what are you doing? You're like meditating? Are you like sitting? Do you have an intention? Or were you just like, oh, look, that's so pretty. That's a great tree. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're hit. What's up? Like, tell me more details about this. I need to understand how this unfolded.
You are going to be sorely disappointed by the end of this. So, track back a few days earlier, I've just flown down into Nepal to attend a music festival. We have, we've had a good time, but we're in this sort of camping space. I am dead sober. I am walking around just in nature. I'm about a kilometer away from my friends, because they're sort of, at the lower end of the valley, and I'm sort of like walking around. Beautiful weather, and it really, if you ask me what were you doing earlier and what did it lead to, the previous night I partied so hard.
I love this story. I'm not disappointed at all.
I was just in bliss mode because I had had a good dance and I had fun with my friends. Life was good. Yeah. I was not there. If you ask me, were you feeling spiritual in that moment? Forgive me if I sound, a bit full of myself, really. But I am constantly in a spiritual space when I'm traveling. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not highly spiritual, like I'm levitating off the floor, but I feel very connected when I'm traveling, especially when I'm in nature. I just always felt I am in a meditative state, if that makes sense.
I understand you on so many levels. Yeah. I feel like you, I am an avid traveler. Like, I've been grounded in 2020. I feel like I got sent to my room. But for the most part, like, I am adamant about traveling, and I love to be on a boat in the water. Like, I feel like I'm in a blissful place, like when I'm just like with friends and family with nothing to do and just lots of wonderful conversation. And like, I inherently think everything's spiritual, but I think that there's certain experiences where you feel just so connected with everything. I think
absolutely you're in communion with nature in that moment. You're really, so I was really chilled out, and I was, and I suddenly sit down, and the truth is, when this happened, when I was literally just walking, yes, if you want me to pinpoint it to one specific thing, I looked at trees and I was kind of going over like this kind of step kind of a thing, and I looked on the floor and I saw a bunch of grass forming like a sacred geometry pattern, and I said, oh my God, that's terribly symmetric. And then I'm like, what's that? And then it was this, as an answer to what is that, it was just this kind of offloading, like an avalanche of information, but a really cool, soothing avalanche, like somebody cracked open my brain and poured cold milk into it. That's kind of the feeling. And as soon as it was happening, though, I have to be very honest, it was the scariest thing ever, because you don't just know things like that. What your travel itinerary is. Life is good. Nature is good. You love everybody. I did have a rather global disposition about myself at that time, like one world, no borders, and all of these things. But beyond that, as a human being, I had never spent time overly thinking about the design of the universe. And so when that happened and I started seeing these things, I actually thought I was going mentally ill, that I was having some sort of a schizophrenic or psychotic episode. I mean, again, I say these words, but what do I know what it means, And there I am sitting, and then at the same time, you have to imagine, I'm scared that, if this is a psychotic episode, then maybe I should be careful not to walk to the edge of the mountain. A voice might ask me to jump off. It's very, so the human mind takes over at that time, and fear becomes the basis. But to the other side, what was being shown to me was so life altering that it was hard to stay in the space of fear. And so, and generally when I'm in fear, I start joking with myself. I'm quite the comedian. So there I'm sitting and going, am I the next Messiah? Like, really? Why doesn't everyone know this information? And then I'm sitting there going, wait, why me? Why not like Angelina Jolie or Justin Bieber or someone, Why me? And so I'm generally like that. I know how to sort of, gather my thoughts together. Yeah, so it was quite the anti way of how the movies portray it, where there's this kind of beautiful light streaming in and God comes in and tells you this is the truth of the universe, or an alien comes down and touches your third eye, and then Paul transfers everything into your head. But it was just this sudden lifting of the veil, and
Yeah.
I was able to think and calculate that far. And there were, in that download, in that first download, there were blueprints, and there were sort of design elements and platonic solids, which I never understood during that time. And
Mhm.
all of these things, and I'm like, and again, I'm joking with myself, like, wait, are you expecting me to take this down? Like, dude, I don't know what you're saying to me. Like, it was all of this information. So
Yeah.
yeah, today I laugh about it, but at that moment it was quite scary.
I
And
love it because it feels like it was such an ordinary moment, but at the same time, extraordinary and magical and beautiful, but then overwhelming. So it's like now you've gotten like this humongous download, this information that you don't even fully understand. So tell me
yeah.
about what happens next. Did you like run back to the music festival and be like, oh my God, am I crazy, guys?
Oh,
Like,
no, no, no. I
like, what
spent, after the 2 hours got over, I immediately turned further deeper into the sort of greenery that they had there. And I
happened?
spent the rest of the day there because I just needed to understand what just happened. So it was an episode, but after that episode got over, it was like, wait a second, did that really happen? And then I'm sitting there and sort of, starting to calculate now, like, sort of, okay, so if that's that, if everything is connected to each other in thoughts and patterns, and all of these are part of one infinite consciousness, and all of these things, I started questioning it for 6 hours. And I'd like to say that it kind of felt like a really high, and then I came out of it, it's like, wait a second, did that happen? And then I came back to Dubai, and that's when I said, hey, before I commit myself to an asylum, let me actually get onto Google, my best friend, and and just go. And I had no idea what to type in. It was not like I could type in sacred geometry. I was going pattern, people, energy.
Yeah.
I know Reiki by this point. I've reached second level, third level Reiki already by this point. So, I know that I transfer energy to people, but I kept thinking that energy is outside of me, and it is channeling through me and then going through my hands into someone. I had all of the concepts sorted out. I
Mhm.
was still only moonlighting as a healer, with a little bit of Reiki. I know friends, family, people who come to me, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
But once this happened, I came to Dubai, I found information, and that's when I discovered sacred geometry. And then I started researching information on everything I saw, and started finding research to confirm what I saw.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think when this information came through, and I started researching it, and started actually finding my soul family, my community out there for the past 9,000 years,
Mhm.
in recorded books, have recorded information about sacred geometry.
Mm.
There was one sort of community of people who are quantum physicians, who are looking at this from a perspective of science, right? Metaphysics, and it's Nassim Haramein and the Resonance Academy, and all of these people. It was fantastic people. I went and joined the delegate program, and I was like, oh wow, this is very sciencey stuff, but it still didn't connect to what I had seen during that download.
Mhm.
Then I went into all of the books that I could find on sacred geometry, and everything sort of addresses design, architecture, so the design of nature, sacred geometry in ancient civilizations. It really looks at culture, and culture, science, design, art, all addressed, right? And then very few places, like with Matthew Brownstein, addressing the sacred geometry of the human experience. And for me, it was about, okay, so based on what I saw, oh yeah, this research is exactly what I saw. And what a wonderful time it is to be alive in this year and this age, when people are looking at proof for things, and in an age where I don't have to go into secret libraries to find things. There's a brethren, there's a sisterhood and a brotherhood and a worldhood out there
And
who
Google.
are already into this, and they're just waiting for you to join them, you know and so that's what I've done so far. What I've done is I've taken that sacred geometry information that I saw that day, found the research for it, put it together into a workshop where I introduce people into the world of sacred geometry. And it has been the most fascinating trip for me. This journey since the past, I think about 7 years, that it's been 7 years in the making, but the journey of really discovering myself through this work. Because one, when people start with sacred geometry, they've seen it in places. They've seen a friend who has a sacred geometry tattoo. They know a friend who uses crystals on a sacred geometry grid. They have no idea what it's for. They don't know the before story, So it's really nice to see people go from like this sort of very curious face to this face that is elated, is lit up with the information about sacred geometry, because it connects all the dots.
Okay, I love it. So now you have to give us a little tiny intro into what is sacred geometry. Like, just give us for all my newbies that are like, okay, so like this sounds beautiful. It sounds like patterns, and I didn't like geometry in high school at all. So
I failed math. So sacred geometry is the visual representation of sound. Sacred geometry and sound, we call it sound, but what is sound? Sound is frequency and vibration. So frequency and vibration, when visually represented, looks like symmetric circular geometry. And this can be, seen in the cymatics experiments done by a lot of new people today, but it was started by Dr. Hans Jenny back in the 70s, I think. And he basically took a black board, put some salt on it, and then produced frequencies onto it, right? So when he did the salt moved by itself symmetrically in a geometric shape, yes? And then when he produced higher frequencies, like really high frequencies, there were complicated geometries forming with the sound by itself. So frequency and vibration have within them, it is what actually creates form and pattern. It gives shape and form to everything. So it's really interesting to think, what do you mean? How can I be made of frequency and vibration? So sacred geometry has been in part of every culture for all of these generations, right? And they have been trying to say this to us through parables, through mythological stories, through witchcraft and all of its tools, through different shapes and tools and forms. But at the end of the day, today science tells us, and science has proven to us, that every single atom in our body, remember how we learned that atom is proton, neutron, and electron? It is not. So they have now been able to look deeper into the structure of an atom, and it's more than 25 odd different, or 20 odd different particles currently being segregated between leptons, hadrons, and bosons, right? So all of these particles in there, which you can say, hey, the technology was not good enough. Earlier they could only see this much, but now we know that it's now being called the particle zoo, right? So now the most important thing is, when they looked at the nucleus of an atom, 99.9999% of an atom is nothing. It's pure energy. So you're sitting there and I'm sitting here, and we have these computers, and we have our couches and our ceiling and our, all of these things that we have, all of it at a nuclear level is pure energy. So that in itself, so this energy produces, so all of my atoms have energy. Those energies have vibration and frequency. That vibration and frequency, when it projects into the infinite consciousness, it creates a sacred geometry shape. And they are different, complicated, intricate, comprehensive, pulsing, undulating, constantly evolving energy. And this design keeps changing with each sniff and each breath and each action and each thought and each word. If you think of the butterfly effect, a butterfly flaps its wings in the US, and an earthquake happens in Japan, because all the energies are connected with each other. Take chaos theory. What looks like chaos in the beginning, eventually a pattern will emerge, because in every place there is this design. So this essentially is what sacred geometry teaches us. It teaches us that we have a vibration and frequency. Your existence does not stop at your shoulders or your hip, whichever is bigger, right? It does not stop there.
Mhm.
You are part of your energy field, which is projecting and connecting to the energy field of everything around you, everything merged together into one. And we are all part of this one pulsing infinite consciousness.
Woo, I love that. That's a lot. That's a lot. Okay.
Yeah,
So I love that. Everything is connected. Everything is built, has some sort of. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about the platonic solid and then also about flower of life and seed of life. Because I
sure.
know that these are probably some of the most common sacred geometry terms. And I feel like I don't know, maybe our listeners out there are super, super sciencey and mathy, so I'm still like kind of like letting it all sink in, but I feel like it's mind blowing. It's basically like everything is connected. Every sound has pattern, which is like in itself, mind
Mind
blowing.
blowing, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So like, I'm just like, okay, this is so fascinating. So let's talk about those really like prominent terms right now.
So the idea of where does this geometry start?
Mhm.
Yes, where does it all begin?
Mhm.
Can be correlated to the idea of the seed of life coming together is part of this sort of creation story. If we go with, let's go with sort of loosely go with the Bible, right? So the Bible talks about on the first day of creation, God opened his eyes, or he arrived and he moved in all directions, right? So if you imagine a single point, and from that single point, you move in all directions, what do you become? You become a sphere, isn't it?
Oh, got it, got it.
So
Okay,
he
got
moved in all directions. I mean, it's really interesting to see if there was a void in the beginning, if there was nothing at the point of, oh, if I could also point out at this point where we're talking about sound producing everything and giving shape and form to everything. Remember that we all come from the Big Bang. It's a
yes,
bang. It's a
yes.
sound. It was a huge sound that created the entire world.
Never makes that connection until right now.
Yes.
I
And
know.
then
Like
in,
it's
in the
so
Bible it
funny.
says, first there was the word was good, the word was God. It's the word. I mean, Christianity constantly keeps talking about love and light. Why aren't they saying first there was the light and the light was God, or first there was love and love was God? No, no, no. First there was the word. It's the word. The Quran begins with a word, and that word is you read. All it says, that book, what you're meant to do actually with the Quran is not get too lost in the stories, but just read it in that particular grammar of that particular Arabic, because you're producing resonances just like mantras.
And I think it's similar with the Holy Book of Kabbalah. And the Zohar was written in Aramaic, and you're supposed to allow yourself to scan over the words, and that is to create. That's so fascinating. But I just want to point out that Big Bang thing. So in my mind, I feel like I've known, this term Big Bang for my entire, like, for ever since I was a kid, and you learn that for the first time in your first science class, but it never occurred to me until a moment ago that
Yeah,
bang is a sound. And I'm like, it's like I never thought about bang.
yeah. Scientists who were very well versed in English had the entire English language to their disposal, and they go, "Let's pick bang," you
Right?
know.
That's amazing.
Completely
Okay,
makes
I love
sense.
that. Okay,
So
so
so we're back to seed of life. So
yes.
we have to start with the seed of life. So there it is. There's a void, and the creator, so to speak, opens his eyes, right, and moves in all directions, forming a sphere,
Mhm.
right? If you take a sphere of that same size, you can only have another 6 spheres around it. Yeah.
Mhm.
So on the first day, God does this, God moves in all directions, and he liked what he felt. So he did it again,
Mhm.
right? And then that's when the one becomes two, and the vesica Pisces, like a Venn diagram, is created, right?
Mhm.
And now think of the egg that is within a woman's body. The
Mhm.
egg, when the sperm enters it, what happens? The cell splits,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then there was light. Actually, in the laboratory, when they looked at an egg splitting, in the moment that it splits, it actually produces a low plasma light.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting. Mhm.
Pro-lifers believe that's where the soul enters the embryo. So you see,
Interesting.
there's that resonance to what the Bible says on the second day of creation, and it goes on and on and on. And on the seventh day, God rests,
Mhm.
therefore creating the perfect seed of life.
Mhm. And
And then
this is
from the
the
seed,
wait, this is the middle circle, and then the circles all around it.
6 circles around it, correct.
Okay.
And so And so that's the egg of life. And that's when the doctor tells you, congratulations, you're pregnant, for example, you know, distant screaming. And then, so you have the seed of life that is formed, which is basically in 3D, the egg of life. And then from there, it just continued growing with the same radius of the first sphere. Goes on and on and on until it becomes the 32 cell version, or in our case, I think the flower of life is formed. So when the seed of life continues to grow, the flower of life is formed. Yeah. And then, of course, there is far more details to the flower of life, why there are 2 circles around it, and, you know, what it cuts through, and flower of life, the usages of flower of life. But this is generally where that idea comes from. Now, when you produce sound into water, it also behaves quite similarly.
Yes.
The design is formed from a middle and then kind of expands like a mandala, if you think about it. So that's what mandalas are all about, right? So mandalas are basically a central circle, and the design grows and grows and grows and grows, right? Now imagine you as a baby or as an egg in your mother's womb, right? Since that moment, you are a vibration. And when the energy or the frequency of the sperm enters, that vibration starts to split, the cells split, and you are also beautiful geometry since you were thought, a twinkle in your father's eye. So it's really interesting to observe that, wait a second, so in everything that I am pure energy. And this energy can be measured. That's the beauty of it. So look anywhere in nature and you can see sacred geometry beautifully. Look at a flower, look at a succulent plant, look at a nautilus shell, look at an ammonite shell, right? Look at a honeycomb, how perfectly geometric a honeycomb is, or a cobweb is. Isn't it? We don't really spend time looking at it. Look at how a snowflake looks. It looks amazing. Simply, if you were to take the measure from the tip of your finger to your wrist, that multiplied by 7.5 is your height. You can put your feet here in this inner part of your arm, and that's your shoe size. Every part of you is geometrically aligned to the golden ratio. Yes, there are mutations that happen depending on the energies that you are carrying from your ancestors. Yes, but mostly you are part of this divine design as well. So that's the physical space still. Now that brings us into, okay, so now we know, okay, sacred geometry is the vibration and frequency represented, the seed of life, you know, the flower of life comes into these spaces, and therefore everything that grows in the universe has its sort of foundation in certain types of shapes. And these shapes are the Platonic solids as discovered by Plato, the philosopher Plato. And the Platonic solids in itself have had references to different elements in nature. So the hexahedron is connected to earth, tetrahedron to fire, the icosahedron to water, octahedron to air, dodecahedron to ether, the 5 elements. And then when you take those sacred shapes and add 2 more sacred shapes like the star tetrahedron or the Merkaba, and then a full sphere, you get 7 shapes, which is used for the 7 chakras of the body. And these, intending on setting intention and manifesting with the use of these shapes, amplifies the effort of your manifestation.
I love it. And this is why we use these shapes and crystal grids, right?
Absolutely. So the crystal, the flower of life shape, or the Metatron's cube shape, or the seed of life shape, allows for that crystal grid's energy to be channeled through a design that the universe understands, you see. And then you can see a lot of people create mandalas, morning altars. They create beautiful crystal grids, and you will notice the crystal grids are also these beautiful geometric shapes. What you're essentially doing is you're directing energy from the crystal into an intention, setting an intention into it. So all of these are tools of sacred geometry healing or angelic healing, and all platforms use it. It's really interesting that when I talk about sacred geometry, I'm talking about sacred geometry as the basis of every module you've ever seen. So I'm like that. Do you remember the movie Big Fat Greek Wedding?
Yes, a little bit. Yes, I've seen it.
Do you remember the father who used to always say, give me any word and I'll connect it to Greek?
Yeah.
I'm basically that father walking around, and I tell people, tell me anything and I'll show you the connection to sacred geometry.
Oh my God, I love it. I feel like we should quiz you or something. I love it. Oh, amazing. So tell me like a little bit more about ways that people can use sacred geometry in their regular life. Like I think because I feel like it for the most from people that are just approaching it, it might feel a little bit abstract, right? Like, okay, like I know
Absolutely.
my body that is made of sacred geometry. I know that when I look around, everything around me is sacred geometry, but how do I utilize this information to basically get me closer to the things that I came to this planet to do?
Absolutely. So you see, exactly what you said. So that I did reach that existential crisis as well, where I said, yeah, great, everything has a geometry. Now what? You
Mm-hmm.
know, and it was this, everything has a geometry, everything is connected, but I could not find the words to figure out. But what about, there was something else within me that I really wanted to get out. I started writing it, I started putting it together in my pages, and that's when and this still is about, we're still talking 2013 or so. I came across Dr. Masaru Emoto's work.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Masaru Emoto basically takes tumblers of water,
Mm-hmm.
and he puts labels on them, doesn't say anything, doesn't do anything, simply puts labels on them: compassion, wisdom, I will kill you, you fool. Different labels, right? And not in one tumbler, Shireen.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
thinking, imagine all of those in one
I know, right? It'd be so the energy would be all confused. He
tumbler.
also did he also do the rice experiment as
Yes,
well?
absolutely.
Okay, got it.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And so, seeing what that experiment shows us is that when people set high vibrational thoughts, remember our brains have brain waves. That's how EEGs are taken, right? EEGs
Hmm.
show you the reading of the gamma waves, the delta waves, the sleep waves, the theta waves that come out of your brain.
Hmm.
So when the wave that was sent into the water was high vibrational, like compassion, wisdom, happiness, I love you, so on and so forth, molecule of water would freeze in the most symmetric manner. It would align to the design of the divine design of the infinite consciousness. It would align to the universal consciousness.
Hmm.
But when it came to the words like you fool or I will kill you,
Hmm.
the water molecules felt like they were being dismantled. The old shift in consciousness, I always say this, the old shift in consciousness would have you believe that you fool and I will kill you are bad, and it is negative, and it is Satan, and it is evil, and all of these things. But the new shift in consciousness teaches you that low vibrational emotions, energies, and situations
Hmm.
are actually there to help you dismantle the existing structure so you can rebuild it into what you want to rebuild to. Knowing this now, knowing that every thought in your mind is actually shifting and creating the vibration around you, for which there's plenty of scientific proof now as well. When you know that everything around you can be shifted merely by your thinking, by your inner traumas, by these vibrations of different things that's being produced from you, you begin to understand that it is not in changing the outer environment that you will find inner peace. It is by changing the inner environment.
Yes.
If you have a terrible job and a terrible, life partner, and a terrible sense of style, and terrible, environment around you, and a terrible living space,
Hmm.
when you change yourself internally, the space around you begins to transform.
Is
The
absolutely
simple,
true.
yes, the simple examples of that are, because your vibration is connected to certain friends. When you think of that friend calls you because you're so aligned with that friend. Or when you're in love with someone, you think they are the bee's knees, they look so good, they're like delicious.
Mhm.
Try having a fight and breaking up with them, they look like gargoyles. They look horrendous.
Yeah, yeah.
But using that as an example, you can see that it is not the person that is different, it is you that is different.
Yeah.
The entire journey of sacred geometry quantum healing is, number one, to recognize that there is this geometry in everything you say, geometry in everything you see, then beginning to behave in a manner that you can start sort of transmuting tragedies and traumas into beautiful opportunities,
Mhm.
and knowing that every good time is the time to be grateful so you can have more of that.
Oh, I love that. And in quantum healing is very much focused on like this healing at the quantum level. Am I saying, do you think like
When you think of quantum healing in itself, the etymology of the word itself, the etymology of the word itself, sorry, takes you nowhere. but quantum healing, God, it's the idea of quantum healing is that you're healing subtle energies.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You're healing subtle energies. You're navigating through your actions and words with mindfulness and awareness and seeing, oh, I woke up in the morning and I walked to the kitchen to make a cup of coffee, but when I looked at the cup, it made me feel sad. To then think, where is that sadness coming from? And to learn, slowly but surely learn, and this is what I do in my coaching work, is that I teach you how to observe these subtle energies and go through life like your entire life is a beautiful garden, and you're constantly weeding and watering and replanting and harvesting and nurturing this beautiful sacred geometry garden of yours. This is what you're doing. And that nurturing, you can't have a garden and just water everything for one day and expect it to stay that way, isn't it? You could try growing one plant.
Yeah, that's real.
Imagine people who go through their life tending to and loving their whole garden. Have you seen some people who have these beautiful rose bushes and they have mango trees and olive trees, and people who have farms? It is amazing. On a daily basis, they're weeding out things, they're removing rodents, they're spraying whatever needs to be sprayed onto the plants, they're taking out what is it called, refertilizing the soil on one area after a certain thing has been reaped from it. There are so many analogies and sort of metaphors in there for working on your own energy field. It is a daily, constant work. And what I do, I open people to the world of sacred geometry, first of all. The realization, earlier you asked me, what are things people can do to sort of use sacred geometry in their life, right? So the first thing is just to learn about sacred geometry. Not even the abstract, complicated parts of it. Just watch a few things. Only thing you do is sit and draw a mandala and learn a YouTube video on how to draw a sacred geometry shape. That's enough. Then start to observe the world around you as vibration and frequency. Instead of thinking, I'm just drinking this glass of water, think, I am drinking this glass of water.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
When you begin to observe that water and you are actually just the same, because both of you are pure energy, and through your energy field to pull in the best nutrients of the water and imbibe that water with an intention of not only quenching your thirst but filling you with abundance. And this goes into any form of healing from this point. Go into Reiki. Let's go into Reiki. So with Reiki, what are you doing? You are, as a channeler, as a conduit. Yes, my master used to say, don't think your conduit is gold, it's just a PVC pipe. Don't think that you are giving your own energy. In Reiki, you are taking the universal life force energy and transferring it merely as a conduit to the person that is in front of you, the patient that is in front of you. Right? What are you actually doing? You are, through your energy field, pulling with your intention, pulling white light energy and flushing it out through your heart into the portals that are your hands and transferring it to a human being. And that human being is also concentrating on that point of their body. And when the intention is set, that vibrational field begins to reorganize itself. There is one very famous video of Qigong healers, Chinese Qigong healers, who are putting their hand on the tumor in a lady's uterus. And they show live the uterus the tumor becoming smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller live.
Yeah, I've seen that video. I love
that.
That
makes me wonder.
Yeah, it definitely that does. Like I'm also a Reiki master teacher. So the first time that I experienced Reiki was probably the second time that I was 100% sure that energy was like a thing, right? Like before, like years before I'd experienced it, but it was a very powerful experience and surprising. And then with Reiki, I was like, oh wait, I can feel it. But one thing you did say that I noticed was so interesting is that you see white, I see purple when I'm channeling Reiki. So I feel like it's just so beautiful in the way that we get to experience things in definitely in different ways, but it's still, I was taught the same way that you were, where it's like it's not you were just there merely as the channel. Like your only job is to pull and to allow and to be clear.
Yes.
That's
And so
appropriate.
similarly, colors also have frequency. So
Yeah.
if you are always seeing purple light, that means you are constantly pulling energy in the source of the ultraviolet space,
Mhm.
right? So it's the crown chakra and the third eye chakra. Yeah.
Mhm.
You are pulling energy from those centers and you're transferring it into the person. And
Mhm.
the energy that you're giving them is intuition. There's the deep energy of, interdimensional healing. It's really nice to look at it from that, the connectiveness to the oneness, that comes in with these colors, right? But
Yeah.
there are times when I do healing and I see different colors as well, depending on what I'm doing for the person,
Yeah.
and again, color is merely frequency, and that frequency produces a vibration. So colors actually also are sacred geometrical, and they have their own design as well.
That was amazing. I feel like I learned so much, and I'm super, super, super excited to research a little bit more about how to incorporate sacred geometry in my life. But I think definitely hearing that idea that everything was super connected is like super magical. So thank you so much for sharing all of those beautiful insights and magic with us today. So here at the Magic Hour, we always love to end an episode with 3 Feed Your Soul questions. So I really just love to hear more about how healers care for themselves spiritually and emotionally. So I'm just going to ask you to answer these 3 questions for me. So the first one is, are there any consistent activities or rituals you do to maintain a sense of inner peace?
Yes, I'm chronically grateful.
I love.
I'm just grateful for everything, just in every way. I'm grateful for the good times. I'm grateful for the bad times. I find myself steeped in a sense of gratitude, and somehow when I take traumas as possibilities, as triggers, use traumas as catalysts to raise my vibration, and when I use good times to stay in high vibration, it really is nice to look at all of them as teachers and be grateful constantly. Absolutely.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. Okay, so when it comes to self development, I know you named a couple books before, but like if you had to think about, a couple books that really offered life changing discoveries for yourself, what would they be?
Oh, that's such a vivid and vast question, really. The first thing I would say is,
Three.
simply attend one of my workshops. I mean, that's the best thing I would tell you. I mean, because I've basically condensed all of this information into a space where you can understand sacred geometry, not just from a sort of what the others have said, but you can experience it from through your own experience, through your own understanding of things with proof.
Mhm.
But the books or masters that have led me here is, one is the Resonance Academy and the Resonance Foundation. So any article they put up, any course they put up is fantastic. It really brings you into the world of this high vibrational living. They're not necessarily books, but they are courses and sessions and things that you can read, and it's really fantastic. Then I think one of the books that really influenced me throughout this was Matthew Brownstein. He talks about sacred geometry from the perspective of the human experience. Third one would be the autobiography of a yogi. When you read that book and you go through with every page you going, that's not possible, that's not possible. It really opens you up to what is actually possible in that energetic space where you are constantly in high vibration.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Okay, and the third and final question is, when you are in an emotional rut, what are your go to ways to bring yourself out of that feeling?
My go-to way to get me out of a rut has, oh, I don't want to lie about this, it's just laughter.
I love it. That's,
Find a way to laugh.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, take life way lightly, laugh a lot,
Mhm.
and it's always been laughter, because more than anything else, laughter, the energy of laughter it gets you so high. I love it.
Yeah, I love that.
you know it's the entire cosmos is this beautiful comedic dance. It's just, as long as you're playful and you flow with it, it's fun. If you try to kind of in a rut, even a rut can be funny if you just look at it from the larger perspective of things. Nothing is the end of the world.
Yeah.
So when you look at it from that, with everything, look at everything with a sense of humor. It absolutely changes the game.
Oh, I love that. So true. Thank you so much. This was again just a magical chat. So can you tell our listeners how they can follow you on your adventures?
I am on Instagram at The Sacred Being, and I usually offer workshops online. I have global workshops online workshops coming up all the time where I share sacred geometry information. I also offer this sort of sacred transformation and sacred shift sessions, private coaching sessions for people who really want to address specific issues. So when someone comes to me, I actually am able to step into their energy field and go with them, hold them into that space where we go to that particular energy signature that is blocking their abundance and recode them into a perfect flow. So we do this work and then they do exercises that go along with it. So I really coach them into how to think, how to speak, how to do, and to sort of a mind vibe reality perspective, shifting perceptions and attitudes in your mind, working on your traumas and beliefs in your vibe, and setting realistic goals and visions in your reality. And then that sort of trifecta helps them to really transform in their life. So these are the spaces. But on Instagram, The Sacred Being, I have information that I put in there, and I think that's where I most connect with everybody.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Magic Hour podcast. If you want to learn more, you can find us on our website, www.mylittlemagicshop.com, and follow us on our Instagram at mylittlemagicshop. See you next time.